I remember sitting there, staring at my screen back in 2008, and I was just so sure. I was absolutely certain that the market was waiting for me. It sounds crazy when I say it out loud now, but at the time, I felt like there was some guy in a dark room somewhere, maybe in New York or Chicago, just watching my little account. I would put my buy order in, I would set my stop loss exactly where the books told me to, just a few cents below that obvious support level, and then I would wait. And almost every single time the price would dip down, it would hit my stop exactly, and then it would take off without me. I would sit there just fuming. I would think, how did they know? How did the market know exactly where I was hiding? It felt personal. It felt like the whole system was rigged against me specifically. I spent years, and I mean years, living in that headspace. I thought I was doing everything right. I read the books. I followed the gurus of that era. I thought that support and resistance were these solid walls, like bricks. I thought if the price broke through, it was because the trend was changing. But what kept happening was this flickering. It would break, I would get stopped out, and then it would just reverse. I spent so many nights just staring at those charts after the market closed, trying to figure out what I was missing. I was losing money, but more than that, I was losing my mind. My wife would come into the office and ask if I was coming to dinner, and I would just be sitting there in the dark, staring at these red and green lines, feeling like a total failure. I couldn't explain it to her. How do you explain to someone who doesn't trade that you feel like a giant invisible hand is reaching into your pocket and taking $50 or $100 every single day? It took me a long time to realize that I wasn't being targeted. I wasn't special. I was just fuel. That's a hard thing for the ego to swallow. I think that's why it took me over a decade to really get it. I wanted to believe I was a player in the game, but I was really just the liquidity that the real players needed to get their orders filled. I remember talking to this old floor trader I met at a conference in Vegas back in 2012. We were grabbing a coffee, and I was complaining about getting stopped out. He just looked at me and laughed. He didn't even look at my charts. He just said, "Where do you think the big guys get their shares? They can't just click a button and buy $10 million worth of stock without moving the price 10%. They need someone to sell to them. And who is selling to them? The guys like me who are getting stopped out." That conversation stayed with me for a long time. It didn't click immediately. I went back home and I kept trading the same way for another year because, well, habits are hard to break. I was stuck in this loop of thinking that my stop loss was my protection. I thought it was my shield. But for the institutions, for the people moving hundreds of millions of dollars, my shield was just an invitation. It was a pool of orders they could tap into. I started to look at the charts differently after that. Instead of looking for where the price was going to go, I started looking for where everyone's stops were probably sitting. I started looking for those obvious spots where everyone was told to put their protection. The double bottoms, the clear trend lines, the psychological numbers like $100 or $50. I remember one specific trade in a big tech stock, I won't name it, but it was back during a particularly choppy summer. I saw this perfect triangle forming. Everyone on the internet was talking about it. The textbooks say you wait for the breakout. I did that for years, but this time I just sat on my hands. I watched the price drift toward the bottom of the triangle. I knew that thousands of retail traders had their stops sitting right under that line. And then it happened. A sharp, fast move down. It looked like the world was ending. The volume spiked. It was a bloodbath for about 5 minutes. And then it stopped. It didn't keep falling. It just sat there for a second, and then it started drifting back up. That was the moment I realized I had been looking at it all wrong. That move down wasn't a change in trend. It was a clearing. It was an institution needing to buy a massive position, and they needed to find enough people willing to sell at that price. The stops provided that. My old self would have been one of those people selling at the absolute bottom, thinking I was being disciplined by taking my loss. It's a lonely feeling when you realize that your discipline is being used against you. I think that's the part of trading psychology that nobody really talks about in the flashy videos. They talk about greed and fear, which are real, don't get me wrong. I've felt plenty of both, but they don't talk about the betrayal. You feel betrayed by the rules you were taught. You feel like you followed the instructions, and the teacher gave you an F anyway. I went through a phase where I didn't want to trade at all. I was bored and I was frustrated. I would sit in front of the screen and just watch for hours without taking a single trade. My friends would ask me how the trading was going, and I'd just shrug. I didn't have anything to show for it. I wasn't winning, but I wasn't losing as much anymore either. I was just surviving. I think surviving is the most underrated skill in this business. Most people I knew when I started in the late 90s, they're gone. They blew up in the dot-com crash, or they got wiped out in 2008, or they just gave up because the sideways years between 2010 and 2013 bored them to death. I stayed because I didn't have a choice, really. I had put so much of myself into this that I couldn't imagine doing anything else. But it was a grind. It wasn't glamorous. It was just me in a room, trying to figure out why the market kept doing the opposite of what seemed logical. I started noticing that the more logical a setup looked, the more likely it was to fail. If it looked like a perfect setup that a 5-year-old could see, it was probably a trap. I started calling it the liquidity illusion in my own head. This idea that there's a wall of support there, when really it's just a buffet line for the big banks. I remember I tried to explain this to a friend of mine who was just starting out. He was all excited about this head and shoulders pattern he found. I told him just be careful because everyone else sees that too. He didn't listen. He took the trade, put his stop at the right spot, and got cleaned out just like I used to. He quit trading 6 months later. He said the market was rigged, and I mean, in a way he was right. It is rigged, but not in the way people think. It's not a conspiracy. It's just how the plumbing works. If you want to move a huge amount of water through a small pipe, you're going to have some back pressure. There were times I thought about quitting too, especially when crypto started getting big and I saw people making millions of dollars on coins with dog names. I felt like a dinosaur. Here I was, trying to navigate the complexities of institutional liquidity in the index markets, and some kid was making more money than me in a week by just buying and holding something he didn't understand. It messed with my head. I felt like I was working too hard for too little. But then I saw those same kids lose everything when the cycle turned. I realized that they hadn't learned how to survive. They had just caught a lucky wave. Survival requires understanding the messiness. It requires knowing that the market isn't a math problem. It's a psychological battleground where the biggest players have to hide their footprints, and they use us to do it. I spent a lot of time thinking about my own ego during those years. I realized that my need to be right was what was costing me money. I wanted to be right about the support level. I wanted to be right about the breakout. When I shifted my thinking to, I don't care about being right, I just want to see where the orders are, everything changed. But it's hard. It's really hard to tell yourself that the chart you spent an hour analyzing might be a total lie. I started waiting for the stop runs. I started waiting for the move that looked like a failure. It felt wrong at first. It felt like I was betting against everything I had learned. My brain would scream at me, "Don't buy that, it just broke support." But I would look at the volume, look at the way the price was reacting, and I would take the trade anyway. That's the thing about this business. The things that feel the most uncomfortable are often the things that actually work. It's uncomfortable to buy when everyone else is panicking and hitting their stops. It's uncomfortable to sit on your hands when a move is happening because you're waiting for the inevitable reversal that traps the latecomers. I spent so many years being the latecomer. I was the guy chasing the move after it had already started, putting my stop right where the institutions were looking to exit. I was basically paying them for the privilege of taking my money. I don't think I really found my stride until I stopped trying to be a hero. I stopped trying to catch the whole move. I just started looking for those little pockets of liquidity. I started thinking like a predator, I guess, but a very small one. Like a little fish that follows the shark and eats the scraps. The shark doesn't care about me. I'm too small to notice. But if I try to swim in front of the shark, I'm going to get eaten. That's what a stop loss in an obvious place is. It's swimming right in front of the shark and hoping it isn't hungry. I remember talking to my sister about it once. She's a nurse. She deals with real-world problems, life and death stuff. I tried to explain the stress of a trade that's going against you, and she just looked at me like I was from another planet. She said, "So you're just clicking buttons and losing money that isn't even physical." It made me realize how detached this life can be. You can sit in a room and lose $1,000 in 10 minutes and there's no sound, no blood, no nothing. Just a number changing on a screen. But the toll it takes on your nervous system is real. I've had days where I felt like I'd been in a car wreck just from sitting in a chair and watching my stops get hit over and over. Later, I realized it was just my brain doing what brains do under stress. It was trying to protect me, but in the market, your protective instincts are usually the thing that gets you killed. I've seen so many people come and go. I've seen people with PhDs in math get absolutely destroyed because they couldn't handle the fact that the market doesn't follow their formulas. I've seen people who were incredibly successful in business fail at trading because they couldn't handle not being in control. In business, if you work harder, you usually get better results. In trading, you can work 18 hours a day and still lose more than the guy who spent 10 minutes looking at a chart. It's not about effort. It's about perspective. It's about seeing the game for what it is. That's why I started the Profit Pulse thing, I guess. I just wanted a place to talk about this stuff without the hype. I'm tired of seeing the ads for the 3-step systems that promise you'll never have a losing trade again. It's a lie. You're going to have losing trades. I still have them, 25 years in, and I still get caught sometimes. I still let my ego get in the way once in a while. I'm human, but the difference now is that I know what's happening. I can feel it when I'm being used as liquidity. I can feel that itch to put a stop in a safe place, and I have to tell myself, no, that's where they want you. Sometimes I think back to that guy in 2008. I wish I could go back and just sit next to him for a minute. I wouldn't give him a strategy. I wouldn't tell him which stocks to buy. I would just tell him to breathe. I would tell him that he's not crazy, and the market isn't out to get him personally. It's just bigger than him. I would tell him that those stops he's so proud of are actually just fuel for a machine he doesn't understand yet. I think he would have felt a lot better if he knew that. It took me a long time to forgive myself for all the money I gave away to the institutions back then. I felt like a fool, but you can't be a trader without being a fool first. You have to pay your tuition. Some people pay it in a year, some people pay it for a decade. I was one of the slow ones. It's funny how the more things change, the more they stay the same. We have faster computers now. We have more data. We have all these fancy tools. But the underlying mechanics of liquidity haven't changed since the days of the floor traders. The big orders still need to find a match. The institutions still need to find a way to get in and out without slippage. And the easiest way to do that is still to trigger a bunch of stop losses. It's the one constant in a market that's always changing. Whether it's 2008 or 2026, the people who don't understand liquidity are always going to be the ones providing it. I remember this one time, it was maybe 4 years ago. I was in a trade and I felt that familiar panic. The price was stalling right where I thought it should take off. I had my stop tight, and I just had this flash of my old self. I realized I was doing it again. I was being the liquidity. I moved my stop. I know they tell you never to do that, but I didn't move it because I was hoping. I moved it because I realized I had put it in the most obvious spot on the planet. I moved it to a place that felt wrong, a place that felt way too far away. And you know what? The price dipped, it went exactly to where my old stop was. It churned there for a few minutes and then it ripped higher. If I hadn't moved it, I would have been out of the trade with a loss right before the biggest winner of my month. That's not advice, by the way. Moving stops is usually a recipe for disaster. But it was a moment where I realized I finally understood the game. I understood that the map isn't the territory. The chart isn't the market. The chart is just a record of where people got emotional. And the most emotional spots are always the ones where the liquidity is the highest. It's where the fear is. It's where the relief is. When you hit someone's stop loss, you're taking away their choice. They have to sell. They have to buy. They don't have a say in it anymore. And that's exactly what the big players want. They want forced participants. They want people who have no choice but to provide them with the shares they need. It's a cold way to look at it, I know. It takes the soul out of it a bit. But trading isn't a soulful endeavor. It's a mechanical one, even if we experience it emotionally. I think that's the part that stays with you after 25 years. You stop looking for the magic. You stop looking for the perfect indicator. You just start looking for the footprints of the people who are being forced to do something they don't want to do. If I can find where the most people are going to be forced to exit, I've found a potential entry. It's a complete reversal of how most people are taught to think. I've had friends ask me why I still do this. Why sit in a room and deal with this kind of pressure every day? And I don't always have a good answer. Sometimes it's just because I don't know what else I'd do. But other times it's because there's a certain satisfaction in surviving. There's a quiet pride in knowing that I was the fuel for a long time, but I managed to stop being the fuel before I ran out of gas. Most people don't make it that far. They run out of money or they run out of spirit. To still be here, after all the crashes and the bubbles and the boring years, it means something, even if nobody knows my name, and I'm not selling some masterclass on how to get rich. The reality of this life is that it's mostly just waiting. It's hours and hours of boredom punctuated by moments of extreme stress. And the people who succeed are the ones who can handle the boredom without doing something stupid and handle the stress without losing their minds. I've failed at both of those many times. I've taken trades out of boredom that cost me thousands. I've panicked under stress and closed positions that were perfectly fine. I'm not a robot, but over time the mistakes get smaller. The self-awareness gets a little sharper. I've noticed lately that I don't even get angry when a trade goes against me anymore. It's just information. If I get stopped out now, I don't think the market is rigged against me. I just think, okay, there was more liquidity there than I thought, or the big players are looking for a deeper level. I just move on. That's a level of peace I didn't think was possible when I was starting out. I thought trading was always going to be this high stakes, adrenaline-fueled thing. But the best traders I know, the ones who have been doing this for decades, they are the most boring people you'll ever meet. They don't want excitement. Excitement is expensive. They just want to find a spot where they have a slight edge and then wait. If this sounds familiar to you, if you've felt that feeling of being watched by the market, you'll probably get what this channel is about. I'm not here to give you a secret formula. I'm just here to tell you that what you're feeling is a part of the process. That feeling of being used as fuel, that's not your imagination. It's just the reality of how the system is built. It's not fair, but it's the game we chose to play. I think once you accept that, once you stop fighting it and start trying to understand it, the pressure starts to lift a little bit. I don't know if I'll be doing this for another 25 years. Some days I feel every bit of my age. But for now, I'm still here, still watching the orders, still trying to stay out of the way of the sharks. If you've been through something like this, if you've had that moment where you realized your stop loss was just an invitation, drop it in the comments. I read the comments more than people think. It's nice to know I'm not the only one who spent years in the dark trying to figure this out. Subscribe if this kind of honest trading talk helps you think a little clearer. I'm not going to promise you wealth or freedom. I'm just going to promise you the truth as I've seen it. This is the reality of the market. It's not the flashy charts or the luxury cars. It's the quiet realization that you're a very small part of a very large machine. This is the part nobody glamorizes. The part where you realize you're not the hero of the story, you're just a participant who's trying not to get crushed. It's not an easy way to make a living, and it's a tough way to live. But after all these years, it's the only thing that feels real to me. This is what actually stays with you. Not the big wins, but the understanding of the game. The knowledge that you're still standing when so many others aren't. It's a heavy thing to carry, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. I think that's all I have for today. I've got some charts to look at, though I'll probably just end up sitting on my hands like usual. It's a boring way to spend an afternoon, but I've learned that boring is usually where the money is. The excitement, I'll leave that to the people who are still acting as fuel. I've done enough of that for one lifetime. I'll talk to you guys later. Stay safe out there. Don't let your ego pick your stop loss for you. It's an expensive mistake to keep making.